Hi everyone, welcome to Playform. Today we're going to be talking with Carla Gannis on how she uses Playform to create these really remarkable pieces of digital art. I just also wanted to announce that if you have not tried Playform before, please make sure to create an account and try it out. We'll be taking attendance essentially and putting additional $15 worth of credits to anyone who attended today's webinar. A new feature that we launched this week is called Face Mix, and it's really cool. You get to blend together different faces and photography, and so make sure you log in and try that new feature. I also want to let you know that inside the chat that I shared an exhibition opportunity that's coming up. We're currently looking for AI artists to nominate for an upcoming exhibition with the World IP Organization. The application link is in the chat, and we need to have everyone submit by tomorrow. And so if you're interested, please check that out. And I'm going to turn this over to Ahmed and Carla. Thank you for participating today, Carla. We're really looking forward to the presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to have Carla joining us today. Carla has been one of our very earliest users since May 2019 when I met her in an event in New York City. I was giving a talk and she was in the audience, and she was also giving a talk in that event, I guess. I talked about Playform at the time, very early, the alpha version, and she joined right away and spread the word. Carla is teaching at NYU, and in September, we have a workshop together in NYU where basically she also talked about using Playform in her work. And she has done amazing work over that year. I always inspired by what she's doing using Playform. That should always go beyond what I even thought possible. So I am glad that we are having her talking today. I would like Carla to start introducing herself first, the way she likes, and then we'll take it from here.
Okay, thanks so much, Ahmed and Jennifer, for the invitation and the introduction. I'll just quickly say I'm a new media or interdisciplinary or digital artist. I have many different ways I describe my practice. And as Ahmed said, I teach at NYU in the Integrated Digital Media program there in the Department of Technology, Culture, and Society within an engineering school. And I will be talking a little bit at the beginning of this lecture about kind of where I come from as an artist, and then showing you work that I have been producing using Playform. So without further ado, let's go to the next slide. Can everybody hear me okay? We're good? All right. So since I've been thinking about virtual life, I've been thinking about virtual life, computer simulated systems, and emerging intelligences for quite some time. Pictured here is my avatar. Oh, let's see if it wants to play. Sister Gemini, who first emerged in 1999. And she was my altered digital ego who was like me, but also autonomous. A fiction, of course, as I just recently finished a back-to-back BFA and MFA in painting. And we're talking old school oil paintings on canvas. But in the late 90s, I threw away all my paintings, rather dramatically, and began working with digital technologies. Still, having no degrees in computer science and being accustomed to traditional artist tools like paints and paintbrushes, at that time, I couldn't really imagine actually working with a tool or a system that could grow, adapt, and learn. When you work with a paintbrush, it doesn't learn from you. Okay, so next slide. Now here I am today, Carla Gannis and Carla Gann, C.A.R.L.A.G.A.N. Cross-platform avatar for recursive live action generative adversarial network. We, or I, as you like, work together in a still speculative realm as an artist. That said, the world has changed considerably in the past 20 years. Advances in machine learning and extended reality technologies particularly in the development of user interfaces that do not require one to be an engineer or software developer, now offer new portals for art and creative expression. So as Ahmed mentioned, I first heard about Playform when he spoke at the NYC Creative Tech Week conference on AI and creativity in April of 2019. And he introduced Playform and this platform that provides a studio for artists to experiment with collaborating with an AI. And he also participated in a virtual fireside chat with artist Danielle Baskin. And they discussed, particularly in response to the auction sale of the first, which is laughable, AI-generated artwork, which had created some controversy at the time, if any of you remember this big sale at Christie's. Now, topics they discussed included who gets to claim creation credit for artworks made with AI? Are any pieces made with AI original? As a digital artist, you know, that has been a question about my own work for quite some time. And then some other questions. When machines programmed by humans are trained on artwork made by humans and then produce artwork with the input of other humans, of which a select few are chosen for public display by still different humans, who made those works? So I signed up to work with the alpha version of Playform immediately after these two talks, as these questions were exactly what I was engaging with in my own practice, and particularly through my relationship with Carla Gannis, cross-platform avatar for recursive live action. Now here are my earliest experiments with Playform in May of 2019, and this one is entitled A Portrait of Me as My Artwork. I fed in 175 images of my artwork from 1997 to 2019, along with photos of my face. I then went through the curatorial process of selecting my favorite images from hundreds and thousands generated. Now here is a screenshot, Ahmed. Remember the early platform of Playform's UI at the time. As a platform, it was in its infancy a year and a half ago. Any of you who work with Playform now know it offers a far wider range of tools and techniques to generate images. And it's really been amazing to see how the tools have developed and expanded. Given that Carla Gannis, the avatar I keep mentioning, I call her C dot, by the way, so from here on out, I'll just call her C dot, has been a major component of my practice for the past few years, I wanted to use Playform as an actual machine learning platform that allowed me to explore the relationship with my speculative fiction identity, C dot. So my next project with Playform was to share my memories with C dot. So I began by reflecting on a memory from childhood, and then I gathered images, data sets from the internet that represented aspects of that memory. I uploaded the images to Playform as inspirations or influences. This is the Gannis model, where a single or multiple training set generates new data based on certain parameters passed on by the original data. And here are the rather small data sets I used at the time and a few of the original images generated by Playform. I then selected numerous images, so I'm curating now, much like if you think about photography and, you know, the first time artists were actually interacting with a machine, so to speak, right? Or a new kind of tool where the process wasn't just hands-on. And so that kind of curatorial response has been something around since, you know, the late 19th century. Anyway, I then began to form this rendering of this memory. And here it's a memory of a Fiat convertible and a mother and her teenage daughter wearing matching dresses. Strange, yes, I was still wearing a matching dress with my mother. Another one. Now, what you're seeing here is not one single image generated by Playform. Instead, I collaged many of the generated images together into a composition that resembled abstractly what I recalled. And here's the last memory I'll share. I was a child of the 80s. So although I took my piano lessons seriously, I couldn't wait to get to the arcade after practicing piano to play my favorite game, Miss Pac-Man. Now, CDOT, as a product of my imagination, is not a system yet that can be programmed with memories, nor develop ones of our own. But I like to think these early experiments working with Playform as part of her evolution as well, a way of seeding her with my human memories, filtered through an authentic machine learning platform. Now, my next project. Throughout the month of May 2019, I decided to turn to my social media networks to find out their feelings about the relationship between Carla Gannis, me, and CDOT, me in origin, but potentially something other than me. This was specifically for a project at the Nida Art Colony in Lithuania entitled The Symposium on the Fluidity of Humor and Absurdity. I enacted a kind of contest beginning with the popular meme, "Who wore it better?" As you see, this was a small data project, and at the beginning, human Carla seemed to be more popular. Now, of course, this is an unscientific series of polls, and the images or my prompts could obviously sway people to answer in certain ways. But anyway, as the polling continues, it seems people in my networks began to warm up to CDOT. Here, a manipulated photograph of me and a manipulated 3D render of CDOT, both are perceived as real by the largest percentage of respondents. And here, an image generated by a GANs program also takes us back to the question of who is the artist. Interestingly, 53% felt CDOT was the artist of this image. She is also certainly perceived to be better at games. So here is my very professional data visualization of the poll responses. They're kind of like, look like little Pez dispensers. And so this is, from these polls that I took 7. And I was inspired by the early crowdsourced piece by Komar and Melamed, where they made paintings, most wanted or least wanted, based on input they got from the internet. This project is from back in 1994. So here you see America's most wanted painting is representational, includes a landscape, the color blue, and you got George Washington there. And generally, from what I remember of this project, the least wanted paintings oftentimes were abstract. So that was a kind of fascinating aspect of that project. Now, I then created, with my own project, string searches for image data sets based on the questions I had asked. So the number of images I chose to put into Playform were based on their percentage of positive votes. So these were my ingredients, so to speak, for the Carla. The name of the project was Carla less than equal to, greater than equal to Carla soup. So I wanted to make this big soup in Playform based on all of this data that I had acquired. So I uploaded 2 data sets, images of CDOT and myself, and the images based on poll data. And beneath are a few of the results generated. So here you see the inspiration are the shapes and contours, and then they, over time, over a few hours of baking, so to speak, or cooking my soup, they began to resemble the second set. From there, I texture mapped a 3D environment for a VR experience of CDOT, because she was the clear winner as an artist and game player. So here she is painting portraits generated by Playform while playing chess. Now, when I talk about texture mapping, in case you don't understand what that means, what I mean is in 3D environments, you're working with a completely simulated environment, but you're building 3D representational objects, right? And that what you cover those objects with, the skin, so to speak, are also called texture maps. And so from the various images generated by Playform, I wrap the various objects in those images generated by Playform. Now, human Carla had been voted as having superpowers, go figure, and respondents also preferred in one poll the black hole she offered to them from her kitchen to the bundt cake that CDOT offered. So here is a still on the left and a video of human Carla in a cape with Playform texture maps again Over on the left, a Google Earth image of where I live. And on the right, the video, it's overlaying a well-known artwork from the 60s. Some of you might know it. In this video, Carla Gannis is reenacting Eve's climb leap into the void, which is an early photo manipulation, right? So if any of you are familiar with that image, it looks like he's leaping off of this building, you know, and it's going to hit concrete. But actually, that image had been manipulated pre-Photoshop, and there were men beneath holding a little, you know, kind of trampoline device to catch him. And now, my current project is entitled Wunderkammer. So this is based on the idea of the Cabinets of Curiosities, a 17th century convention kind of predating the museum, right? Where people would collect their own, you know, would make collections. And generally, Wunderkammer or Cabinets of Curiosities or a Cabinet of Curiosity was an entire room filled with cabinets. Today, I actually have my students maintain Wunderkammers, because if you think about our social media platforms, Pinterest, Instagram, we're all kind of keeping our own Cabinets of Curiosities today. So this is its installation at Telematic Media Arts, and it is presented in 3 levels: grounded reality, i.e. physical reality, augmented reality, and virtual reality. On the left, you see the top image of the actual physical gallery, and the bottom image is from a 3D simulation of the gallery installation in VR. So a 1-to-1 simulation. It's not photographic, it's completely simulated. To the right is the actual physical Cabinet of Curiosities that I produced for the show, and it is located at the front of the gallery. And here is a picture of just the cabinet before I put in all the sculptural objects. So each cabinet is lined with images printed on vinyl adhesive that were generated via Playform. Actually, one cabinet, because of the patterns on the dresses that were sewn for and stitched for these figures, that cabinet, I decided to let the eyes rest, so I didn't line that with a Playform generated image. But the rest are all lined with images generated from Playform representing different taxonomies. For example, here there's science, the cosmos, and religion, old tech, endangered species, and memento mori. So again, all of these were stitched together from images that Playform had generated, and then I printed them on adhesive vinyl and lined the cabinets of each one. Endangered species. And by the way, these creatures show up again in VR. For example, here a bison whose skin or texture map has been generated by Playform via a training model on the topic of endangered species. Also a back-trimmed camel and a blue whale. Now back to the installation. The second level reality in the holodeck is where trompe l'oeil prints come to life through AR. There are 7 characters there to lead you through this AR reality, then into virtual reality. All of the Playform backgrounds are the product of training sets based on the identities each of these avatars represent. So we have Oliver, he's an influencer, a media personality and politician. Carla Gannis, as you've heard many times, mirroring, the idea of mirroring. Lucille Trackball, who is about humoring, computational humorist. Victoria, who is an AI librarian and historian, she's preserving. Mora, a comfort robot and love machine. Lady Ava Interface, who actually appeared on the Whitney Museum site for 7 months as a project. She is assisting, an AI assistant to museums and institutions. And Tipu's Tiger, who is about decolonizing. And he is based on the popular work Tipu's Tiger in the Victoria and Albert Museum. And I call him the cat meme decolonizer. Here they are when the AR is activated, a short video clip, and to the other side, you just see stills of the works when the AR is activated. So that when I said trompe l'oeil, these are all just flat on the wall, but to generate this idea that there is depth. And then this is another cabinet, which is about remembrance. I'll mention here quickly that in addition to CDOT, these other avatars have been sharing with me sharing with my studio, or been in the studio as early as 2017. And they are inspired by a Mannerist painter, Arcimboldo. He created portraits of people based on fruits and vegetables, organic fruits and vegetables. And I'm creating these portraits through their digital signifiers of emojis and memes. But I see them all, as crazy as it may seem, as prototypes for future robots, at least in my world. Because an all-white robot represents a horrifying and dystopic future to me. And now we enter the VR. For the 2 days that the show was on view, there were a couple of visitors. We were being very careful to clean the headsets before each visitor. And then, of course, we had to close the show due to COVID. You begin the gallery experience with this Memento Mori sculpture and then enter the VR. Beginning in the gallery simulation that you see to the left, the visitor is quickly jettisoned into a landscape where a huge video game cabinet, for a contemporary cabinet of curiosities, where else would you begin a cabinet of curiosities? The video game cabinet as a kind of castle here. And here's a video. The audio or the sound art is generated by artist Luc Dubois. If you can hear the sound, I'm not sure if I shared sound. And so for that first entry point, the video game cabinet, here are the Playform images that went into the development of the cabinet environment. Also, the trees and the buildings have also all been texture mapped with images generated by Playform. After entering the video cabinet, one travels by way of many different animals that greet them at the very entrance, like the bison and camel you saw earlier. And then you enter the main chamber. And then there are 2 exits to the left and right that lead you either into the cosmos or a matrix. And again, they consist of various images from Playform trained on these themes. And then in the main chamber, there is a library. And actually the background patterns for that are social media icons and different images of Wunderkammer from the past, or cabinets of curiosity from the past. Talking about new ways that we access data today. And many more cabinets. Here's Tipu's cabinet. And Oliver, who is the politician and influence. The images hanging behind him are products of training Playform on world leaders. Here you see the AI comedian Lucille Trackball with portraits of female identified comedians hanging in Lucille's cabinet. And right now I'm showing you stills, but all of this is moving and animated, and you can actually interact in that environment, pick up objects, throw objects around, get close to Lucille. Lucille is the same height as you are in that VR experience. There's love and sex with robots and little R2-D2 hopping up and down. I actually trained a data set just on R2-D2 to generate that texture map for him. Sex and tech, because we know with VR and any emerging technology, sex always seems to come into play. Non-human biology, endangered species, and recently discovered species. Again, I have trained and am still training Playform on each of these themes. The decolonization and global pluralism cabinet. Now, everything I've been showing you so far is from my exhibition that opened on March 14th this year and then closed. Since that time, however, I have continued to work on Wunderkammer and really to develop the content of each cabinet much more extensively. There are more and more layers of objects and Playform patterns and network lines, as I refer to them, those kind of gold lines you see connecting and running throughout all of the cabinets. And each cabinet now is lined with a specific Playform pattern. Here are some of the raw Playform images that line the decolonization cabinet. And when I say raw, that's just taking them straight from the platform. But then they get layered and they just become part of the ingredients, part of the makeup and the system of each of these cabinets, even if they can't always be kind of pointed out individually. And have you noticed that I am a maximalist? This is the cabinet of comedy, where there are numerous plaques celebrating female-identified comedians from around the world. 2 framed portraits exist in the cabinet that will be animated. I'm working with my studio assistant, Nath. If Nath, I can't see everyone here right now, but Nath, if you're here, hello, and thank you for working with me. And so we're animating the contents in each of these cabinets as well. So the portraits will be animated, and they are artificial women who've been generated by Playform based on my inputting images of 100 female-identified comedians of the 20th and 21st centuries from around the world. So let's take a look. This is the original data set here, or image data set of these 100 female comedians from around the world, female-identified comedians. And then the artificial women here. Now, why would I be motivated to create artificial women? Well, after reading about a roboticist who has just created a female robot who's going to star in a feature film, I started to think about that. And this trope we see a lot of times with female robots. So this roboticist calls the woman, the female robot that he has created, an AI, a perfect woman. But guess who she's modeled after? Miss Universe contestant finalist. So I feel like comedy is definitely around where women have a voice. And historically, they've been considered unfunny, but there are many women who disprove that across the world and throughout history. And the cabinets of politics and history. Here are some rather uncanny images generated using Playform's freeform algorithm. I fed in about 45 contemporary or current world leaders to generate these images. And also lining the cabinets, again, it may be difficult to discern given the layers of stuff I have in each of these cabinets now, but leaders of the world combined with every national flag of the world. And this is using the creative morph option in Playform. And finally, the technology cabinets, emerging tech and obsolete technology. And here are some of the great Playform results from the wavy freeform method for old tech. Those are the images you see on the left. And to the right, a great cat robot for my emerging technology section. And that was based on an early creative morph technique, early meaning, you know, about 7 or 8 months ago, that Playform provides. So I fed in images of robots and kitty cats to generate this image at the bottom right. Finally, I've been thinking about the architecture of Wunderkammer. After you go through the video game cabinet, visitors just see that interior main hall. But as I continue to develop this project, I'd like there to be a building to house this 21st century Wunderkammer. So I've been training with 2 sets here, images of architecture from all 7 continents, and images of nature, flora and fauna from around the world. Because I feel like if we are to survive, better integration of technology with nature, technology is a new nature, of course, but that integration is hugely important. And I'm going to end the presentation part here. So we have time to go into Playform for a bit and to answer any of your questions. I'm not even sure how we're doing on time. I think I'm ending a little early. Great. So these last 2 images are training with heart and fist emojis. According to most DataViz statistics that I've been looking at lately, they have been the most used emoji over the past few months as we face and try to heal from 2 pandemics in society today. So there's all my information. You can follow me on Twitter, go to my website, follow both me and C Dot on Instagram, and thank you very much. I'm now going to get out of this presentation and go straight over to the Playform pattern so I can actually show you some live demonstrations. However, I'd like to open it up to any questions people may have first to kind of lead the conversation.
I have many questions, but I don't want to interrupt now, and I'll ask the audience to put their question in the chat, so we can
right.
after this part.
Oh, I see. Vintage Playform, Luke. Okay, now I'm looking at all the chat images, chat messages. What was the sample size on these polls, Tom Brown? So sorry, I didn't see that message while I was presenting. But I actually, if I go back to the presentation, my screen is still sharing, right? So let me just go back up. You'll see, I mentioned this was a very, very small data project. And I have one slide here that shows that, so for each one, I did take note of the number of respondents for the polls. So for example, the first one, it was 32 total respondents. These images are a little bit small, but generally, again, it was a really small sample size. So that's why I mentioned this was an unscientific poll. So between 35, 38, 32 respondents to the polls that I published. Another question, why do you think people struggle to accept AI art as art? That's a really great question, Alicia. And it's actually been a question I've been grappling with just as a digital artist for over 20 years, because when I put down my paintbrushes and stopped, applying pigments to a canvas and began to work with computer technologies, first video, and then getting into interactive technologies and digital printmaking, people really questioned the validity and authenticity of what I was doing. And they oftentimes back then, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, there was a resistance. One, because art has historically been something that's scarce, right? So we have two models that exist today. We have the ubiquity model in social media where, your brand is enhanced by how often an image is reshared. But in the art world, there's still this idea of scarcity. And so to be able to make an image that is infinitely, or to make an artwork that is infinitely reproducible calls into question the authenticity of that work. So that's one thing that arises that with any kind of generative art, and particularly when we get into AI, where you're generating, thousands and thousands of images, it's like, well, where's the art in that? Because it can be reproduced and reproduced and reproduced. And so I think it really requires a different kind of perspective and conceptual framework for this work, which a lot of it comes out of conceptual artwork and practices from the 60s, the dematerialized art object, the foregrounding of the ideas that are going into these works of art, and changing notions of what the definition of art is. And so with AI, just like with lots of computer generated or algorithmic processes, also people are really kind of suspicious of it not being generated by the human artist, right? Like a machine's doing it, and a machine is cold and detached and emotional. But as I've continued to work with digital technologies and now with Playform, I think of these things more and more as a collaboration. And you might raise your eyebrow to that, but when I worked with a paintbrush or a pen or pencil, there wasn't any kind of feedback to that system, right? And I could really call those things tools. But digital technologies, AI technologies, these are kind of postmodern platforms in a way, right? Where they're constantly evolving, and an artist really has to be adaptive and really think about that relationship with a tool, but also a collaborator in some sense. And I'm not scared to say that there is a collaboration going on. And I only think that, this kind of work is going to continue to grow. There's so many artists starting to work with artificial intelligence. Again, though, I think the strongest work is where the artists are still like, kind of conceptually interrogating ideas and using these platforms and using these algorithms to ask questions about not only, ethnocentric or human, not ethnocentric, anthropocentric ideas about humanity, but about larger concepts about worlds and civilizations and galaxies, and are we all a computer simulation in the first place? Now, more questions related to the above. I wonder if you can share your experience in terms of working with the rest of the art ecosystem as an artist, using such cutting edge materials, medias, and concepts. Okay, so also, thank you, Luke. I think I've actually been kind of talking about that. So, working with VR, right now I have pivoted from working with the HTC Vive platform to working with social VR. So I'm building the Wunderkammer right now in Mozilla Hubs, because one thing I found is accessibility is a big issue. And so I've been working with web VR and social VR as a way, oh, are we still, okay, as a way to distribute the work when people either don't have access, or right now it's not safe to go to a physical gallery and put on a VR headset. And I don't know if that was actually addressing your question, Luke, but I'm talking about the current kind of ecosystem in during COVID-19, of how I'm kind of responding with some of the technologies I'm using and adapting and pivoting to different ones that can be more accessible. Accessibility is key. Okay, great. Okay, are there any other questions that people would like to enter in the chat, or just, I guess you're muted, but are there any other questions?
I don't see.
Oh, here's another one. Yeah, another one just came up. Great, thank you for questions. That moves the conversation along. In terms of AI collaboration, what percentage of the artwork would you say is done by the AI? So it is funny, in some of these kind of data viz projects, these humorous data viz projects I've done, where I'm taking percentages and those kind of things. When I'm working with Playform, for example, I guess, and when I'm working with CDOT, which again is a fictional AI, but inhabiting my kind of artistic universe, I'm not really thinking about division of labor. Maybe I should more, but I haven't thought about those percentages of, the division of labor. But I do know, and it's the particular space I'm in right now as an artist, that it is still very important for me to kind of take these images generated by Playform and by a machine learning platform, and then to manipulate them and change them and integrate them with other things, as you see how I'm integrating them with 3D objects in the Wunderkammer, for example. And I had another point to that. Oh, what was it? Oh, a Jasper Johns quote. I'm probably going to paraphrase this, but I've always loved this. Take something, do something else to it. Because we live in an era of remix. I mean, for example, the data sets that have generated a lot of these images, there are multiple collaborations going on here, right? Because I'm going to Google, sometimes I'll download things straight from my Instagram, but a lot of these, I'm using hundreds of images, and here you can see, for example, 7,500 Playform images generated from my original inputs, but this is one, oh, this was teachers. I had 181 images of teachers. So, all of these images are images that have been sourced from the internet. So there's, something called remix, which has been very topical for the past 25 years for digital artists or internet-based artists. But there's a kind of remix going on here. So this becomes a multi-layered kind of collaboration. I'm collaborating with an AI, but also in these data sets, I'm collaborating with all of these, or I'm remixing all of these other images that I've acquired through just big Google, downloads. And I think that Jasper Johns quote resonates with me in terms of intellectual property and take something and do something else to it. So kind of creating these new soups and taking all of that kind of collective conscious collection of data and finding new ways to kind of add my aesthetic, political, conceptual perspective on what those images or collections or themes represent. Did that make sense? Did that answer the question? So for example, here are some of the inputs. What's really great about the platform as it's been growing is just the numbers of ways that you can train images. So I was talking in my presentation about freeform, creative morph, wavy freeforms. And so each one of these algorithmically kind of generates a different kind of style. And a lot of times as I've been working with the Wunderkammer, I mean, one thing ideally I'd love to get to in the future is for it to really be a generative work where data could constantly be fed in and these images could be working with an AI that's constantly generating new kind of responses. Because one thing about working with machine learning, I'm an educator and a teacher anyway, but I'm also learning as I go and I'm learning as the platform evolves. But as you can see, one thing I also really like is that you can kind of scrub across the timeline and see how the image is generated. It's giving me some ideas. Some of you using Playform are already doing this, making videos from the different generations of the image. Some better examples, actually, I really love the female identified comedians here. So here are my original inputs for this. And it was 100 images here. Normally you need to use at least 30, but I think the more images that, I cooked this one for 3 hours, but I feel like the more images you kind of include, you start to get more kind of interesting hybrid results. So again, you can see kind of the generation of this image as it's morphing. And for my purposes, for the Wunderkammer, quite often, you know, Playform has developed now so that, you know, the portraits themselves are starting to become much more convincing, particularly with what you just launched, the kind of portrait morph process. But sometimes for my purpose, what I really enjoy about Playform is that I can go through the evolution of that snapshot, and sometimes I'm more interested in some of the earlier, more abstract images. And so I'll pull from those. And some other things, now I'm kind of going into a little tech seminar here, but that you can download all of the snapshots, or one other thing, Ahmed, I really love, higher resolution. What did it begin with? 256, wasn't it? 256 pixels, and now we're up to 1024, which has also been amazing in terms of, you know, the increased resolution for the images that I generate and the prints that I made. As you saw, again, I'm using a lot of the Playform imagery on actual physical objects, not just in extended or XR environments. And so that higher resolution, of course, it's still, I tweak it in Photoshop based on, you know, certain kind of color demands or needs or wants, and other things like that. But some really fantastic possibilities here. And let's see, oh, here are the hearts and fists. Now, sometimes when I first generated this one, here are my inputs. So I've been looking at a lot of data visualization. If any of you know some of my early artwork, I emojified the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch a few years ago. So I am not an emoji expert, but I am known for using emoji and digital semiotics in my work. And so I've started looking at a lot of data viz for one of my cabinets I didn't show today, the Networks cabinet. And the data viz for the most used emoji right now during this current time, and particularly this time of crisis. And as I mentioned, two pandemics, you know, the pandemic of systemic racism and of COVID-19. And hearts and fists were the ones that, you know, were garnering the most results. And so when I first generated these images, I was kind of like, oh, it's really hard to see the fists and the hearts. But I was actually, I became more and more excited about these images, and that they're more than just blobs to me, because really kind of extending kind of the signs and signifiers of our culture. And I want to keep working on this one. And that they look so kind of organic. Instead of looking like these clean, crisp kind of vector images, they actually start to look kind of organic. And that's one other thing I really like about Playform that I feel like has actually influenced my own practice, is Playform is often generates more kind of painterly results than a lot of the work I produce, where a lot of times I'm kind of, you know, making sure I'm describing, you know, each kind of object or form in a piece. And I feel like in a way Playform has loosened me up. And Ahmed and I have had conversations about that a lot of that, you know, if you think about this as a developing intelligence or machine learning platform, something that's learning, that this is like it in its nascent form, right? And some of its mistakes where it's not actually able to generate an image that you would expect that's crisp and clear and photographic, you know, give you the sense that it's kind of, it feels more artful, right? I know Ahmed in his talks will show pictures of Francis Bacon, and then he'll show images generated by Playform. But it's really a function or product of the platform kind of making mistakes. But in that, there's such a beauty and aesthetic I find to those images. And so I'm actually really happy with these hearts and fists now. Tom Brown, oh, more questions. Okay, I see that you're using a lot of collage techniques using multiple AI-based images to make up the total artwork. I find I do similar things. However, when I have bigger images, what other adjustments do you make to use AI-created images? Good question. I see that you are using lots. Oh, okay, so what other, it just got copied twice. So what other adjustments do you make to use AI-created images in your work? Right. So I work in Photoshop. So of course I'm doing most of my collaging there. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll go back to Playform if I want to. For example, you'll see several different projects where I've worked with Decolonize and Comedians, World Architecture. So I iterate and iterate. So it becomes this process, again, that's kind of reflexive, where I'm generating something in Playform, I download the results, I start working with them in Photoshop, and I realize there needs to be more density or layers or more abstraction or more detail, right? And so then I'll go back to Playform and cook another set, so to speak, right? And then I also have been playing with, in Playform, some techniques you'll see here, for example, the female identified comedians, I really wanted to generate portraits. So I made sure that the eyes and nose and mouth of all the images that I downloaded, and I was very selective about this image data set, that they were all lined up so I would really get a result of a portrait. For example, if we see an earlier batch, let me see if I can find it. Here's one with wavy freeform with female comedians. And here you see my inspiration sets. They're all different sizes and all different kinds of motions and movement. And so here for the results, I get a lot more kind of abstraction. Of course, I'm using the wavy freeform that gives you that. Some of these are just so fun. And getting, kind of more abstracted portraits from that, where it's compositing all of that different data, that it's kind of learning or interpreting in unexpected ways. So those, when I am working with the created images, I'm like, oh, I want something more unexpected. So, I'll put in data that isn't all kind of aligned. And then when I really want something more specific, like a portrait, I make sure the images that, I'm putting in will kind of lead to generating those kind of results. Did that answer that question, Tom? I can segue. I go off into different tangents, but also a lot of Photoshop work, particularly with early Playform images when they were really small. What I was doing also, and what I've been doing with the cabinets, particularly with the early image generations, was tiling them. So because they were so small, I just started to create, and that's probably where I got the idea of lining the cabinets in the first place, is I started tiling them together so I could get a higher resolution image. And as I started to tile, they became kind of these patterns, and they became this fabric or this wallpaper, and that led to me wanting to, you know, line each one of these cabinets with generated images. All right, yes, helpful. Okay, so any other questions from anyone?
I have questions, definitely. Let me see, I have a lot of questions, so let me just start.
Oh, okay.
AI is, at least in the early stage in the last couple of years, have been associated with this uncanny surreal look of the result, which, as you mentioned, I always refer to Francis Bacon, point out this is basically the aesthetics of machine failure, not machine learning.
Right.
As an artist, did you find this what you were looking for because that's your practice before? You are really into surreal effect, or your style has changed because you have been working with digital tools in general and AI recently?
Yeah. Okay. So did I start working? Has my practice changed in relation to working with digital tools and AI tools? That's kind of the question. And I think yes. Prior to working with Playform, I played around with a few other platforms, but I kind of describe my practice often as a speculative art practice, in that, you know, I showed earlier the first slide of Sister Gemini, my alter ego fictional AI avatar from 1999 through 2004. So I've been thinking about these ideas of the relationship of human intelligence, what we call natural intelligence, with emerging other intelligences, artificial intelligence, for a long time. But all of my work was in the domain of kind of commenting on that, making work about that. Like, for example, the Whitney Museum, I released Lady Ava Interface, who again is a fictionalized AI hostess. She's an embodied, very comical, an embodied representation of Siri, for example, but she spouts poetry instead of, you know, the quotidian things most of our AI assistants provide us with today. Lucille Trackball, one of my other avatars, has done stand-up comedy as an AI comedian. Again, this is a fiction, right? This is a fiction. This is me performing Lucille Trackball through face tracking and motion tracking. And so I think I got really enthusiastic about Playform and artificial intelligence in general when I wanted to kind of leave. And again, I'm still in, you know, the early phases of this work, but wanted to not leave, but to expand beyond just these kind of commentaries, these artistic commentaries on things like AI, virtual reality, for example. And so over the past few years, I've really been diving into extended reality, for example, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. And I think as an important component of all of that, and what is beginning to shape it, you know, artificial intelligence, machine learning is kind of crucial. I mean, it's embedded in everything we do today, right? It's kind of invisible to us, but it's there in everything. And so it just seemed incumbent upon me as an artist who really wants to reflect on the times in which I exist, to start to employ those tools in my work, and to take my work beyond just speculative to actually, you know, working with, training, teaching, and learning from a platform like Playform. Did that answer your question?
Definitely. Very,
okay.
very insightful. I think we have 2 more questions.
Okay.
In the chat.
Oh, at this moment you were deciding which AI paintings to use in your work. Do you think in the future this could be done by a machine? And if so, would you use it? That's a really great question. And actually, a few months ago, I work with RLab, which is a XR consortium based in the Navy Yard. And they kind of sprung out of Tandon School of Engineering at NYU, and now they're a consortium with several schools involved. But I've been on quite a few panels, and a few months ago, specifically a few panels of people who are developing or play testing new platforms or technologies that they are in the midst of creating or producing or trying to get seed grants and funding for. And one was not specifically a machine selecting the images yet, but a machine or a algorithmic set that actually generates data sets, right? Because for right now, I'm going through and doing the downloading, and I'm selecting all those data sets. And because, you know, there are lots of issues with bias, right? With AI, Ruha Benjamin has talked about things like the new Jim code, and that like we have to really, really be conscious of, you know, the data we're feeding in. Like these systems aren't, you know, objective, right? Humans are seeding them. And so we really have to think what we're feeding them and what kind of things could be generated from that, what kind of biases could be generated as a result. And so for right now, sometimes I'll just do, you know, big Google downloads, but more recently I've been much more specific about selecting all my images and my data sets. But back to, sorry, I digress, back to this person who was presuming this tool. It was a machine that could actually create all the image data sets for you. So you feed in, you know, kind of hashtags or different queries, and then it generates the images for you. It does the searching for you. In a way, I was like, oh, wow, I'd really love to automate that. That would be really cool. So that's something. And then later, yeah, as I work with CDOT, I mean, I think I'm working with CDOT, Cross-Platform Avatar for Recursive Life Action, to really kind of come to terms with how unsettled I am sometimes about the idea of, you know, human artists being replaced by machines, or, you know, that lack of agency. And, you know, as I work with these technologies and as I conceptually work with my avatar CDOT and develop this kind of relationship, you know, I'm becoming much more adaptive to what machines may be participating in the future, in terms of even if they might be doing some of the selections and those kind of things. And I think I'm adapting in that way because I think that, you know, we can't kind of stop the flow of progress. But the other thing, and the other reason I'm working with AI right now, is I want to contribute. And however, you know, fallible as a human I may be, but you know, in all these training sets that I'm making, I'm wanting to contribute to this knowledge base that is aware of bias, aware of, you know, the mistakes we can make when it's only a small subset of people per, you know, whether they're engineers or, you know, software developers who are kind of shaping our future by training these AIs. And that's why I really love Playform too, Ahmed, is because you've opened it up to artists, you've opened it up to other people to work with machine learning and in a very accessible way, you know, and to work with that and work with these concepts and really start thinking about how we're seeding our future.
Yeah. I would like to add to that is that actually when we started this, we have existing other platforms that allow you to use AI that are pre-trained already with all these biases. Playform was the only and still the only platform available that allow you to train your own AI from scratch without any bias built in. So you put in your data, you put in your images, and only based on that you can generate, which was not easy because we have to do a lot of technical things to be able to make it work with as small as 30 images as you can do it now. So it's all about basically having the concept of the artist coming through in the result, not just a pre-trained model that everything looks the same.
Yeah, and that's something I have really appreciated, because some other platforms that I was working with before, as an artist, obviously, you know, I didn't want to just work with their found images. I wanted to be choosing and selecting, and so allowing that kind of agency. And also, yeah, that the data sets can be so small, like 30 images, and you can also achieve results within, 2 hours. I mean, all of that is really astounding as a platform, as a machine learning platform. And so, then also, I've been learning over the past year and a few months, I've been working with Playform to, again, be critical of my own selections and choices, right? So back to your question, Ahmed, definitely my practice is changing and evolving as I work with Playform and think more deeply about choices I'm making in terms of the, the data and the data sets that I'm selecting to train. And so I really love that process. As a digital artist, I like to be adaptive and elastic. There are some other questions though. How do you deal with resolution with the different iterations? So resolution, like some of the earlier ones, it's not here, these are all the same resolutions, but so with some of the earlier iterations, you're right, like the resolution, it's not as resolved. A lot of times I like some of those effects because, I spend human labor and hours kind of generating those effects and filters with either code or with Photoshop or After Effects. And so sometimes I just kind of go with some of those effects. And then other times, I'm a big fan of the pen tool. And so I will kind of cut out selections and harden edges and make things crisp if I want to kind of make a particular part of an image pop more. Tom, thank you Tom, it was so nice to meet you. If you're still here, thank you very much for visiting. And then Alicia, do you think AI will replace human artists? Bye-bye. I generally think most people who predict the future get it wrong. I do think I'm a big fan of speculative design and critical design, where and speculative art, as I refer to my own practice, where you speculate on these things, and oftentimes it's not as much predicting the future, but shaping the future. Hence my wanting to participate with a machine learning platform right now. But I do not think that AI is going to replace human artists. In 20 years, Alicia, if you want to, hit me up and say, look, AI replaced human artists, I'll take it. I was wrong. But I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, there are all sorts of different, kind of theories floating out there, the singularity, we're going to merge with machines. All of those things, are imminent or possible. Nick Bostrom's super intelligence, right? And we do need to be aware and consider those things. The future is now. As William Gibson, oft quoted, the future is now, but not evenly distributed. And I think there are a lot of human conditions we still need to focus on and actually harness our technologies to work with us in solving, human and environmental problems, because our future, human future is in danger right now in terms of the environment. So, I don't worry as much about AI replacing humans right now as, humans kind of not paying attention to this age of the Anthropocene and our environment kind of pushing us out. Again, any
Amazing.
responses to that?
I totally think it's not going to happen ever, because at the end, I guess AI can generate images. It can be creative in some sense, but art is different from just making an image.
Yeah.
So art is totally human, because it's about communicating something between you and other humans. So unless we want to communicate with AI, then there's a context of what's called AI art in that case, but it's not there yet. So for the sake of time, we already passed the 1 hour.
Oh, okay.
I would like to thank you very, very much for this amazing, insightful presentation. I really enjoyed everything of it. We have a lot of audience here. I think all of them have enjoyed it very much. One last question: is the cabinets, virtual cabinets, available to see some online now?
I am working on them. I have been the expression burning midnight oil. I've been staying up into the wee hours lately because I'm trying to get everything published to this social VR platform and Mozilla Hubs. So the show is reopening in September in San Francisco in the physical location with the HTC Vive, which requires a headset. But by September, I also will have the social VR, at least the first iteration, available to the public. And so I will keep you all posted. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, you know I'm very active and always letting people, getting the word out about my projects. So very soon, you will actually be able to enter the VR space via your browser, which I'm really excited about in terms of that accessibility option.
Thank you very much, Carla. I really appreciate your insightful comments. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for attending, and have a great day. So good to see you.